The Dynasties of China, presented by Zachary Lundgren. Neolithic China, China before dynastic rule. Longshan culture and Greater Neolithic China. Of the great and expansive history of China, surprisingly little of it involves dynastic rule. The first 8,000 years or so, from roughly 10,000 to 2000 BCE, is referred to by historians as Neolithic China. This isn't isolated just to China, however. Every culture, society, and empire of the ancient world started off with its very own Neolithic period. In China, along with the rest of the ancient world, the Neolithic period marked the discovery and adoption of agriculture, animal domestication, permanent shelters in villages, expression of culture perhaps through art, and the basis of governing. As you may know, China is a really big place, and back then, there were a multitude of cultures and societies inhabiting this massive region. Of these Neolithic peoples, the one that truly stands out is the Longshan. The Longshan culture, also occasionally cited as the Black Pottery culture, inhabited the middle and lower Yellow River Valley region. It is speculated that during the 3rd millennium BCE, the population rapidly expanded, resulting in the widespread adoption of permanent village-like settlements. This would have most likely also led to the growth of agriculture to sustain the larger population. However, all good things must come to an end, and it is speculated that the Longshan people suffered a major population decline sometime in the 2nd millennium BCE. I must, however, stress that this is only speculation. At one period of time, they were there, and shortly later, they were gone. What replaced the Longshan culture were the Bronze Age Erlitou culture. It is currently theorized that the Erlitou people are the survivors of the Longshan culture. The Zhou Dynasty, China's first semi-mythical dynasty. Shrouded in myth, legacy, legend, and stories, the Zhou Dynasty is China's first semi-mythical dynastic power. The story of the dynasty revolves around a man named Yu the Great stopping a series of disastrous floods. For his Herculean effort, Yu is rewarded political power and eventually the throne, officially founding China's first dynasty. Later on in the history books, the Zhou is overthrown by the succeeding Qing Dynasty. For a very long time, the Zhou Dynasty was considered to be pure fable. It was believed that the Qing Dynasty, the first dynasty to invent writing in China, coined the story to justify their rule. However, more and more recent archaeological discoveries have shed some light on the true side of the Zhou Dynasty. Today, the widespread belief is that the Zhou is in fact, drumroll, the Erlitou people. Although the stories surrounding the dynasty are still considered fictional, there is current widespread belief that there was, in fact, a civilization predating the Qing Dynasty. The Legend of Yu the Great. As mentioned in the previous slide, the formation of the Zhou Dynasty is directly linked to the legend of Yu and the massive flood. According to the stories, one day a massive flood strikes a region, destroying everything in its path and threatening the survival of the Zhou tribe. Quote, "Like endless boiling water, the flood is pouring forth destruction. Boundless and overwhelming, it overtops hills and mountains. Rising and ever rising, it threatens the very heavens. How the people must be groaning and suffering." Unquote. Emperor Yao, The Book of History. Desperate to stop the destruction and boost approval ratings, the demigod Emperor Yao appoints an engineer named Gun to stop the mighty deluge. Gun's battle plan is to steal some magic soil from the gods and use it to construct a massive barrier. The plan works for some time. However, eventually the water floods over, the dam collapses, and it was all back to square one. This time, Yao selects Gun's son Yu to continue on the family business. Unlike his father, Yu decides to redirect the water, not block it. For the next decade or so, Yu works tirelessly leading the construction of massive canals. As legend states, he never once returns home during this time, even after passing his house on numerous occasions. Yu the Great, the world's first workaholic. Eventually, the floods are redirected and the land is saved. As a reward, Yu the Great is gifted political power. Eventually, he takes the throne, founding the Zhou Dynasty. And scene, the formation story of the Zhou Dynasty. If you want to learn more about this fascinating story, feel free to check out my blog post on the subject. Link is in the description. The Qing Dynasty and China's earliest written records. The Qing Dynasty. Compared to the Xia, which exists within the gray space between history and mythology, the Qing Dynasty was China's first historically proven dynastic power. From roughly 1600 to 1050 BCE, the Qing Dynasty ruled the Yellow River Valley of modern-day China. Legends recall the dynasty ascending to power after a tribal chief named Tang overthrew the Xia. At this time, the Xia dynasty had suffered numerous crises and was under the control of a warlord named Jie. The Shang are renowned by historians for their technological advancements. In particular, they are known for their advancements in bronze technology, initiating the Bronze Age within China. Along with bronze and metallurgy, the Shang are also advanced their knowledge in math, astronomy, artwork, military tech, and written writing. The Qing Dynasty eventually fell in the year 1050 BCE when the neighboring Zhou state successfully managed to conquer the Qing capital. Oracle bones and China's earliest written texts. Along with evolving their knowledge in countless other subjects, the Shang are perhaps most known for their advancements in writing. In fact, the Shang were the first in China to invent and use a system of written language. One of the earliest forms of writing within the Qing Dynasty came from oracle bones. This was a spiritual practice used by the Shang people to communicate with their ancestors. The ritual would be performed by special officials known as diviners, who would inscribe a question onto a bone of an animal. After the question was stated, the bone would be subsequently heated until it cracked. The pattern at which it fractured was believed at the time to be the divine response. This practice was used especially frequently by several monarchs of the Qing Dynasty, who sought their ancestors' advice for administrative, cultural, and military decisions. The practice of oracle bones resulted in the development of a complex pictographic system. Although the language and symbols have evolved and changed over the millennia since the Shang, the modern Chinese written language is still a direct descendant of the ancient Shang language. The Zhou Dynasty and the Warring States period. The Zhou Dynasty and the Mandate of Heaven. Existing from 1050 to 221 BCE, the Zhou dynasty was a successor to the Shang and the longest-lived of China's dynasties. To justify their takeover of the Qing dynasty, the Zhou coined the Mandate of Heaven. This doctrine stated that one could only lead if they had the endorsement of the divine world, which the Zhou fortunately possessed. Although the Mandate of Heaven was simply used as a propaganda tool for the new Zhou government, it also encouraged leaders to be virtuous. Remember, you wouldn't want to be like the Shang and lose heaven's favor. The first half of the Zhou's existence, 1045 to 771 BCE, is known as the Western Zhou period. This period ranges from the overthrow of the Shang up until the invasion of the Quanrong nomads in 771 BCE. During this crisis, the Zhou capital Haojing was plundered and the monarch King Yu was killed. Compared to the relative stability of the Western Zhou, the Eastern Zhou period was utter chaos. The first half of this time is referred to as the Spring and Autumn period. During this time, the Zhou government had lost almost all power. The subsequent Warring States period would be known to this day as one of the darkest and most brutal chapters of Chinese history. In the midst of this centuries-long crisis, the Zhou dynasty would be succeeded by the famous Qing Dynasty. The Zhou's decline and the Warring States period. In order to consolidate the massive territory of the Qing dynasty, the newly established Zhou government divided up their territory into several fiefdoms led by hereditary nobles. This was extremely successful for the first few centuries of the Zhou. However, over time these states would become more and more independent. This system worked when the leaders of these states had direct lineage to the royal family, cousins or kids perhaps, but after dozens of generations, there was little to no connection left with the monarchy. Around the time of the Quanrong invasion in 771 BCE, these states were serving the Zhou in name only. The subsequent Spring and Autumn period would see these states gain even more independence from the fractured Zhou government. The second half of the Eastern Zhou would be known as the Warring States period. During this time, these states would engage in near constant warfare with one another. The Warring States period would eventually end when the Qin state would gain the upper hand and manage to conquer all the other states. The philosophies of the Warring States period: Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism. Although the Warring States period was one of the most violent periods of Chinese history, it was also one of the most important times for philosophical thought. During the Eastern Zhou, three main philosophical schools of thought were adopted. Confucianism, the first of the three, is one of morality and justice. This belief was coined by the scholar and politician Confucius, who is known for writing the Chinese classic, The Spring and Summer Annals. His belief was that leaders should be inherently virtuous and practice the art of morality, kindness, justice, and sincerity. His most famous quote is perhaps, "Do not impose on others what you do not wish for yourself." Taoism, or Taoism, is a school of thought revolving around unity with nature. It was initially created by Lao Tzu in 500 BCE. The final of the three, legalism, is quite different. This philosophy is one of power through strict laws and codes. Arising from the Qing state close to the end of the Warring States period, legalism states that greed and selfishness were inherent virtues of man, and that society could only function if these traits were suppressed by strict laws. The Qing Dynasty, China's first unified dynasty. The Qing state unifies China. During this time, China was completely shattered into several different states. This period is known as the Warring States period, where all these small fiefdoms were locked into a tapestry of near constant warfare. However, the Warring States period would fortunately come to an end in the year 221 BCE through the establishment of the Qing Dynasty. Directly predating the rise of the Qing Dynasty, the Qing state would manage to invade each of the other states via superior weaponry, strength, and military strategy. After the opposing states of Han, Zhou, Yan, Wei, Chu, and Qi were all conquered, the king of the Qin, Yingzhen, would be declared Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi of the Qin Dynasty. The Qin state is widely considered to be one of, if not the, most important dynasty in Chinese history. For the first time, there was an emperor of a unified China. However, although the Qin is renowned for its importance, it was surprisingly short-lived. The dynastic era of the Qin would only last for 15 years. After Qin Shi Huangdi's death in 210 BCE, more about that story in the next slide, the dynasty would enter a short yet deadly period of rampant political turmoil and palace intrigue. The succeeding emperor of the Qin, Hu Hai, would execute his siblings and all he deemed a threat. This act of unchecked paranoia would be weaponized by the palace eunuch Zhao Gao, who carefully and meticulously advised the paranoid emperor into making political decisions which would further doom the empire. The Qin dynasty eventually fell in the year 206 BCE, being succeeded by the long-lasting and prosperous Han Dynasty. Qin Shi Huangdi's Terracotta Army. During his reign as Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi was obsessed with the notion of immortality. He sent explorers out to all corners of the known world in search of elixirs of life. He himself would also often go on long and cumbersome expeditions throughout his empire in search of the elusive secret to immortality. Unfortunately, curiosity killed the cat, and the emperor met his untimely demise in the year 210 BCE. He died after ingesting pills consisting of pure mercury, which he believed to be the secret to eternal youth. And now the conclusion. The Emperor of China is dead, and he is hundreds of miles away from the capital. Upon witnessing his death, the late emperor's top officials realized that if the story leaks to the presses that the Emperor of China is dead, someone back in the capital might try to usurp the throne. To prevent a revolution, the emperor's top officials present, and a select few of his favorite servants, agree to transport the emperor's body back to the palace while keeping his death an absolute secret. It's just like Weekend at Bernie's. The first few days of the plan go well, but soon the emperor's body starts to decay. To counter the awful smell, the advisors order crates of rotting fish to be carried all around the emperor's personal carriage, per his orders, of course. Surprisingly, the plan works, and after months of gag-inducing travel, they manage to return to the imperial palace, in which the emperor promptly and officially passes away. Upon his death, Qin Shi Huangdi was placed inside a massive mausoleum described by historians as beyond grand. According to the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, the burial chamber of the emperor boasts a crystal mosaic of the night sky, and rivers running of mercury weaving through a map of China. Although the tomb has never been opened, there is a surprisingly high concentration of mercury in and around the emperor's burial mound. Either the account of the tomb's interior decoration is true, or the emperor consumed a Guinness World Record worthy amount of mercury. Surrounding the burial mound is a series of massive chambers containing an entire army of terracotta figures. These are the Terracotta warriors, perhaps the most famous facet of ancient China. These warriors were meant to protect the emperor's mausoleum and fight for him in the afterlife. For being such an important symbol of the ancient world, the terracotta warriors were unearthed surprisingly recently. They were first discovered by local farmers digging a well in 1974. The Han Dynasty and the Discovery of the West. An overview of Han China. Although the Han Dynasty was nearly constantly plagued by political drama and palace intrigue, the Han period saw some of the largest growths in technology and knowledge within China. Lasting from 206 BCE to 220 CE, the Han Dynasty is most notably known for being the first of China's dynasties to discover the empires of Europe. During this time, Confucianism was also widely adopted by government officials. Amongst all the dynastic powers, the Han probably had the most importance within Chinese culture. To this day, a majority of Chinese citizens identify themselves as ethnically Han. With the Qing Dynasty in political ruin after the death of Qin Shi Huangdi, it was a perfect opportunity for rebel leaders to make a run for the imperial throne. The man to succeed in this race to power was Liu Bang. Formerly a law enforcement official, he became a rebel after several of the prisoners he was transporting escaped, a failure which was punishable by death under Qin legalist codes. Now Emperor Gaozu of Han, reigning 206 to 195 BCE, he sought to mimic the highly successful administrative structure of the Qin while adding a bit more Confucian morality to the mixture. After Gaozu's death in 195 BCE, his wife Empress Dowager Lu continued to hold on to power through several puppet emperors. This would start the long ancient Chinese tradition of Empress Dowagers ruling over current emperors. Empress Dowager Lu would also be known for her murderous rampage throughout the palace and the imperial government. Another tradition held closely by Empress Dowagers, however, not to the same degree as Liu. The reign of the Han Dynasty would be broken up by the short reign under the usurper Qing Dynasty, 9 to 23 CE. This short rebellion would divide the long-lasting Han into the Western and Eastern Han periods. Sima Qian. Living from 145 to 86 BCE, Sima Qian is renowned as one of the greatest historians of the ancient world. His work, The Records of the Grand Historian, is one of the few consolidated historical records of pre-Han Dynasty China. The records cover everything from the tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi to the legend of Yu the Great and the ancient Yellow Emperor Huangdi. To this day, Sima Qian is known as a father of Chinese historiography. The Silk Road. The Han Dynasty was the first Chinese power to encounter the Western world. During the Han's power, a network of trading routes were established, connecting China to the empires and kingdoms of Europe and Persia. These routes throughout Eurasia would be known as the Silk Road. Hence the name, silk was a primary commodity which Rome imported from China. Other goods included jade, porcelain, spices, and paper, an invention of the Han Dynasty. The establishment of the Silk Road is considered to be one of the greatest leaps in human civilization. For the first time, goods, ideas, and technology could be shared between the East and the West. The Chinese discovery of the Western world was single-handedly led by a Han envoy led by Zhang Qian. In 138 BCE, he was dispatched by Emperor Wu Di to establish connections with the Central Asian Yuezhi people. However, early into his mission, Zhang Qian was captured by the nomadic Xiongnu, who were enemies of the Han Dynasty. After being imprisoned for over 10 years, he managed to escape and travel to Western Asia, where he learned about the existence of the Romans and other Mediterranean societies. After 13 years on the road, he finally returned to the Han capital to report his findings to the emperor. The Three Kingdoms period and the Battle of Red Cliffs. The Three Kingdoms period was a period of disunity following the collapse of the Han Dynasty. It is defined by the relative stalemate between the kingdoms of Wei, Shu Han, and Wu. Although the Three Kingdoms would be conquered by the Qing Dynasty in roughly 265 CE, the period of disunity would continue. The Qing's duration would be plagued by rebellions and constant invasions from northern nomads. In 420 CE, the Qin was succeeded by the Luisong Dynasty. The Luisong would control the south of China, while the north remained under the occupation of small nomadic kingdoms. This rule in the north by nomads is known as the 16 Kingdoms period, which lasted from 304 to 439 CE. In relation to the south, this period is also known as the Northern and Southern Dynasties period. In the south, the Luisong would be succeeded by the Southern Qi and Southern Chen. The Southern Qing Dynasty would eventually be conquered by the short-lived yet economically prosperous Sui Dynasty. This period of rapid-fire dynasties is known as the Six Dynasties period. One of the most well-known parts of the Three Kingdoms period is the Battle of Red Cliffs. Technically, this battle does not actually lie in the Three Kingdoms period itself, but serves as a starting gun for this period of disunity. During the battle, a Wei state military official named Cao Cao would attempt to reunify China by invading the states of Wu and Shu. After losing significant ground to Wei, Shu and Wu would team up to fight Cao Cao's military at Red Cliffs. According to the popular 14th century novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao planned on using his navy to attack the Red Cliffs. However, his army was ill-equipped for naval combat. To counter the rampant seasickness amongst his troops, Cao Cao ordered that all the ships were to be tied together to create, drumroll, one massive warship. However, during the battle, Shu and Wei used their smaller navy as fireboats and rammed them into Cao Cao's fleet, setting everything ablaze. The Qing Dynasty and the Six Dynasties period. May I present to you the period of disunion, rapid fire. The period of disunion begins with the fracturing of the Han Dynasty into three separate kingdoms, Wei, Shu, and Wu. In the Battle of Red Cliffs, Wei attempts to reunify China by conquering Shu and Wu. They fail in this attempt and the Three Kingdoms period begins. The battle also depletes everyone's resources to the point where they can no longer fight each other for some time. Wu is also the first state in the Six Dynasties period. The Three Kingdoms period ends when the Qin Dynasty, formerly the state of Wei, invades the other two states. The Qin is the second of the Six Dynasties. However, soon after reunifying China, the Qin lose control of the north. This period is known as the 16 Kingdoms period, where the north of China was controlled by 16 nomadic states. The 16 kingdoms would continue on into the Luisong Dynasty, which conquered the Qin. During the Luisong's reign, the north was widely consolidated under a single governing body. This period is known as the Northern and Southern Dynasties period. The north would remain under a constant power, while the southern China would see the Luisong Dynasty, the Southern Qing Dynasty, the Yuan Dynasty, and the Qing Dynasty. The Northern and Southern Dynasties period would end in 589 CE when the Sui Dynasty conquered both the Qin and the north. The Sui Dynasty. In 589 CE, the Sui Dynasty would manage to conquer both the north and the south of China, ending the Northern and Southern Dynasties period, the Six Dynasties period, and the greater period of disunion. The Sui is often compared to the Qin Dynasty. Like the Qin, they unified China, but were short-lived. Unlike the Qin, which met its end primarily through drinking mercury, the Sui simply went broke. After unifying all of China, the Sui began several large infrastructure projects. One of these was the Grand Canal, an 1,100-mile-long artificial waterway meant to quickly transport goods throughout the empire. Along with massive amounts of economic and military spending, there was a major population increase as well. This put a major strain on the Sui's economy, allowing for several rebellions to break out. During a brief civil war, a governor named Li Yuan managed to claim the throne, reorganizing the Sui into the Tang Dynasty. Tang Dynasty, the golden age of dynastic China. The Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty, lasting from 618 to 907 CE, is considered by many to be a golden age and a high point of Chinese society. The dynasty was founded by the governor of what is now Shaanxi province, Li Yuan. With the Sui dynasty reeling from both foreign and domestic strife, Li Yuan was able to claim the throne, establishing himself as Emperor Gaozu of the Tang Dynasty. During the Tang's duration, China existed in an age of abundant wealth and prosperity. Throughout its reign, the Tang Dynasty was a model society, boasting a fruitful culture filled with the arts, technology, and stable governing. Although the Tang is known for its prosperity and relative stability, it did start to decline throughout the 9th and 10th centuries. The last century of the Tang would be consumed by various forms of civil unrest both within and outside the palace. In 907, the dynasty fell to the warlord Zhou Wen. Upon conquering the Tang, Zhou Wen would be proclaimed as Emperor Taizu of the later Liang Dynasty. This would be the first of 5 dynasties in a period of disunity known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. Between the fall of the Tang in 907 and the establishment of the Song Dynasty in 960, central China would be successively controlled by the later Liang, later Tang, later Jin, later Han, and the later Zhou dynasties. The south of China would also be controlled by 10 kingdoms, the Wu, former Shu, Chu, Min, Wuyu, southern Han, Jingnan or Nanping, later Shu, southern Tang, and the northern Han. In roughly 960, the Song Dynasty would reunify all of China. Wu Zetian. Living from 624 to 705, Wu Zetian is the only female ruler of dynastic China. Originally a concubine of the Emperor Taizong, she married his son Gaozong after his death. After Emperor Gaozong's death in 683, Wu Zetian used her years of built-up political knowledge and connections to claim the throne for herself. Overall, Wu Zetian is currently considered to be one of the most effective rulers of China. However, she was heavily demonized for her brutality. This criticism came from the conservative Confucian government officials and future emperors attempting to destroy her legacy. In reality, though, her brutality was mostly only directed towards those who vied to dethrone her. The only female ruler of China, her reign was constantly challenged by her male government counterparts. Luckily, historians have recently begun to tell the true narrative of Empress Wu Zetian, not the skewered legacy imposed on her by other Tang emperors. The Song Dynasty, the world's economic powerhouse. The Song Dynasty. In a brief overview, the Song Dynasty is known for 3 things: its technology, its exports, and its overthrow through the hands of the Mongols. Lasting from 960 to 1279, the Song was a high point for innovation and invention. During the Song, paper money was introduced and agricultural methods were vastly improved within China. Along with new inventions, Chinese innovations such as the compass and gunpowder were also improved. The Song Dynasty is also known for its robust trading system. Song Dynasty China saw some of the highest export rates of any Chinese dynasty. In its height, Song merchants were transporting goods all across Afro-Eurasia. The long-lasting Song Dynasty is divided into 2 periods, the Bei, Northern Song, and the Nan, Southern Song. During the Nan Song period, the north was conquered by the Jurchen tribes of present-day Manchuria. Upon conquering the northern Song territories, the Jurchen would establish the Qing Dynasty. In the 13th century, both the Jin and the Song would fall to the Mongol invaders of the north, led by the Great Khans. The Song Dynasty's economy. Like the previous Tang, the Song Dynasty is known for its economic strength and resilience. Along with a strong economy, the Song is renowned for their robust trading system which branched throughout the known world at the time, even reaching ports as far as East Africa. At its height, Song merchants were transporting Chinese goods such as pottery, tea, spices, copper coins, paper, and jewelry all across the known world. Chinese innovations such as gunpowder and the compass were also introduced to Europe, quickly becoming essential in Europe's seafaring ambitions. The Yuan Dynasty and the Rise of the Mongols. The Rise of the Mongols. From the year 1206 to 1368, the Mongols, led by the Great Khans, controlled the largest empire ever seen in recorded human history. However, the Great Mongol Empire started from humble origins. For thousands of years, the people of Mongolia have been traditionally nomads who live in small tribe-like clans. However, in the 12th century, a man by the name of Chinggis Khan managed to unify the tribes of the steppe. Although Chinggis Khan would not live to see the height of the Mongol Empire, he would start the century-long phase of Mongol expansion throughout Eurasia. Through cunning tactics and powerful warriors, the hordes of Mongol horsemen would be able to conquer all of China, Western Asia, most of Persia, and even all the way into Central Europe. At its height, the Mongol Empire even controlled the city of Moscow and engaged in a winter siege of Vienna. Although it was never carried out, Mongol battle plans even mentioned reaching the Atlantic Ocean. After Kublai Khan, Chinggis Khan's successor, died in 1294, the empire began to fracture. Although the Mongol Empire would exist until the 14th century, it would be divided into 4 distinct geopolitical regions, all united within the greater empire. These khanates were the Khanate of the Great Khan, which included China and Tibet, the Chagatai Khanate, which controlled the steppes of Central and Western Asia, the Ilkhanate of modern-day Middle East, and the Golden Horde, which ruled modern-day Western Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. The longest-lasting of these territories was the Golden Horde, which ruled well into the 15th century. However, frequent political crises and the Black Death would lead to its eventual collapse. After the fall of the Golden Horde, the Mongol Empire had effectively completely dissolved. The Yuan Dynasty. Also known as the Mongol Dynasty, the Yuan Dynasty was part of the greater Khanate of the Great Khan within the Mongol Empire. During its duration from 1271 to 1368, Yuan occupied China, widely traded with the rest of all Asia, under the control of the Mongol Empire. The Yuan government also passed laws oppressing the Han population of China, placing them at the very bottom of a hierarchy structure. Although the Yuan dynasty was incredibly powerful, it was short-lived. Along with the widespread collapse of the Mongol Empire, China would be retaken through several civil wars and uprisings. In 1368, Yu Yangzheng of the Red Turban Rebellion would overthrow the Yuan government, establishing the Ming Dynasty in its place. The Ming Dynasty and the Mighty Treasure Ships. The Ming Dynasty. Lasting from 1368 to 1644, the Ming Dynasty is by far one of the most well-known of China's dynasties. This is mostly due to the Ming's trademark porcelain. During the Ming Dynasty, the ceramic arts were greatly improved, creating an arsenal of exquisite pottery that is coveted by collectors and historians to this day. Present day, the mere thought of ancient Chinese pottery automatically turns to the Ming's iconic ivory and cerulean vases. Along with its pottery, the Ming also experienced a development in the arts, including, but not limited to, literature and theater. In governing, the Ming was incredibly isolationist. Although foreign trade was common in Ming China, it was heavily monitored and at times completely restricted. This was due to the rising influence of European ideologies and beliefs within China. The isolationist policies enacted by the Ming court were also an act of recourse against the previous Yuan dynasty, which was not ethnically Han. The isolationist perspective could be seen throughout the Ming government. During the Ming's rule, the defenses on the northern border were significantly increased to fend off any potential foreign invaders. One of the largest of these military projects was the reconstruction of the Great Wall of China, which had fallen into disrepair in the centuries since the Qing Dynasty. Although the Qin Wall is mere history, several stretches of the Ming Great Wall remain well preserved outside the city of Beijing. Like most of the dynasties before the Ming, its death would be slow. Along with several botched military campaigns, numerous internal rebellions put a consistent strain on the Ming government. The final decades of the Ming dynasty were also plagued by horrendous natural disasters, which caused widespread famine. While the people of China were reeling from these crises, the Ming royalty withdrew themselves from nearly all political matters, choosing to live a life of luxury within the massive Forbidden City. Unfortunately for them, the situation outside the palace gates would only escalate. In the early 1640s, Ming China would erupt into an all-out civil war. In 1644, the leader of the peasant uprising, Li Zicheng, would invade the Ming capital of Beijing and claim the throne. Practically seeing the rebels climbing over the palace walls, the last emperor of the Ming, Zhou Yujian, would famously murder his entire family during a feast and hang himself from a tree behind the palace. After claiming the throne, Li Zicheng would create the Qing Dynasty. However, there was still a considerable number of loyal Ming soldiers spread throughout China. In an attempt to overthrow the Qing, the Ming loyalists allied themselves with the Manchu people of the north, who wished to avenge the death of Zhou Yujian. However, it was all a massive plot by the Manchus to claim the throne for themselves. Only a year after the formation of the Qing dynasty, it would fall to the Manchus, who instead of restoring the Ming, would establish the Qing dynasty in its place. The treasure ships of the Ming. Although the Ming dynasty was one of the most isolationist of China's dynasties, it was responsible for one of the most globally renowned maritime trading operations ever. During the reign of Emperor Zhou, the Ming government arranged several massive naval expeditions to every corner of the known world. The purpose of these expeditions were to collect tribute, prove China's dominance, and to collect all forms of exotic treasure for the emperor. These massive fleets would be commanded by the great eunuch admiral Zheng He. In total, he commanded 7 of these missions before his death in 1433. After the death of both Zheng He and Emperor Zhu, the program was abandoned and the fleet was subsequently destroyed. The massive treasure fleet was extremely costly and time-consuming, which put a major strain on the Ming treasury. During his reign, Zhu also ordered the construction of the Forbidden City. After his death, Zhu's actions were heavily criticized and condemned as overindulgent and a frivolous use of spending. As retaliation against Zhu emptying a large percentage of the Ming treasury, future emperors passed policies aimed at limiting and restricting maritime trade, plunging China into a period of isolationism, which would last all the way until the fall of the Qing Dynasty in 1912. The Qing Dynasty and the fall of Imperial China. The Qing Dynasty. Also known as the Manchu Dynasty, the Qing would be the last dynasty to ever rule China. After succeeding the Ming in 1644, the Qing Dynasty would last until 1912, when after decades of political decline, it would finally be dissolved. Like the Yuan Dynasty, the Qing was not ethnically Han, and had to pass rigorous policies marginalizing Han individuals in favor of Manchus. Such laws aimed at pacifying the Han included only granting high-level government positions to Manchu officials. Although originally successful, the Qing would see a consistent decline throughout its multi-century-long reign. The Qing dynasty's strict isolationist policies would prove detrimental, as it would stint China's development of technology to counter the European colonial empires. After years of unrest and uprisings, the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, Puyi, would abdicate at the age of 6, ending China's dynastic era. The fall of the Qing. Compared to previous dynasties, which saw an arc of development and then decline, the Qing experienced a quick growth spurt in its first century and then a constant decline until its final demise in the early 20th century. The early Qing government was extremely isolationist, at times completely banning maritime trade altogether. This lack of exposure to global politics and technological advancements would cause more harm than good, however. With an antiquated navy, empires such as the Dutch, British, and the French were able to run free within China with little to no resistance. Without any means to counter Europe's advanced navy, the Qing government was forced to provide major concessions to empires such as England and France. By the second half of the 19th century, China was also reeling from various economic problems. Although several attempts to modernize and rebuild the Chinese economy were proposed, they were all stopped by the highly conservative Confucian bureaucrats, who wished to keep China's traditional values at all costs. Another major player in the Qing dynasty's demise was the Empress Dowager Cixi. Until her death in 1908, Cixi controlled every facet of both the bureaucracy and the monarchy. Throughout the late 19th century, multiple spending bills aimed at restoring the economy were hijacked by Cixi to fund her lavish royal projects, including a yacht made from marble. In 1908, the second-to-last emperor of China, Guangxu, died from arsenic poisoning. The common belief is that the eunuch who delivered the poisoned yogurt was directed by Cixi, who died the following day. According to this theory, Cixi ordered the assassination of Guangxu in fear that he may reverse several of her policies after her death. Guangxu was succeeded by Puyi, who was only age 2 upon ascension. He would reign under regency until the year 1912, when he would be forced to abdicate at the age of 6. In one last act of palace intrigue, the Empress Dowager secured the monarchy's fate. After the abdication of Puyi in 1912, the Republic of China would be founded and the dynastic era of China would come to an end. Thank you for watching my presentation on the dynastic era of China. Thank you.